It reads like the opening of a war chronicle. Japan has a long, brutal history with... But the enemy here isn't a nation. No, it's water, falling, rushing, heaving. Priests bless it, farmers pray for it, and planners try to cage it with levies and gates, always a step behind its moods. Every generation adds a new line to the playbook, hiring bankmen, smarter pumps, better maps, and every generation learns the same lesson. Respect the sea, or it will teach you. This is a nation that doesn't just brace for disaster, it out-engineers it. And the results are nothing short of staggering. From hidden rivers beneath Tokyo to wall-building projects that give their Chinese neighbors a run for their money, Japan's approach to flood prevention is part sci-fi, part civil service. Some say it's overkill, others say it's genius. Either way, these are the flood defenses that have turned one of the most disaster-prone nations on Earth into a blueprint for survival, and they have to be seen to be believed. So, let's go see them, shall we? Just before we continue with today's episode, a word from our lovely sponsor, Surfshark. Look, using the internet without a VPN is like shouting your personal info across a crowded room. My pin code! It's... Surfshark doesn't just hide your IP, it keeps your entire digital footprint out of sight. Surfshark encrypts everything you do online and routes it through a secure server. So whether you're on public Wi-Fi, checking emails abroad, or trying to get access to geo-blocked content, they've got you covered. One account covers unlimited devices, it also blocks ads and trackers, warns you about breached data, and can even spoof your location for better streaming options. And yes, it's easy to set up and it just runs in the background. So go to surfshark.com/mega or use the code MEGA at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN for free. Privacy, convenience, 4 bonus months. What a deal. And now back to today's episode. Tokyo's underwater temple of floodwater. Now, beneath Tokyo, an astonishing structure lurks, a colossal subterranean cathedral that's built not for worshippers, but for floodwater. Officially named the Metropolitan Area Outer Underground Discharge Channel, catchy, it's the world's largest underground flood diversion facility. Known more casually by its nickname G-Cans, taken from its Japanese name, it has become an iconic example of megastructure flood defense. As for how mega it is, I mean, we are on the Mega Projects channel, which is on the side project set. I'm working on new studios, everybody, as you can tell, it says. Well, picture a space longer than 2 football pitches, 177 meters, that's wider than a jumbo jet's wingspan of 78 meters, and tall enough to stack a 5-story building in size, 18 meters, as you begin to get the idea. And even then, those dimensions are just the main bit of it, the massive pressure-adjusting tank where floodwaters gather, a vault that is supported by 59 hulking concrete pillars weighing 500 tons each, so enormous they dwarf tour groups like ants in a drain pipe. This underground sanctuary of civil engineering was born out of dire necessity. Tokyo's metropolitan area sits on a flat, low-lying plain laced with rivers that would, left to their own devices, turn ordinary, normal neighborhoods into Venice on a particularly bad day. It's a recent problem too, one caused by rapid and extensive urbanization after World War II, which paved over naturally spongy and absorbent rice paddies and fields and thus left storm runoff with nowhere to go but into people's homes. And we want to stress the word extensive here too, as in the basin that comprises northern Tokyo and its surrounding greater metropolitan area, urban land cover exploded from just 5% in 1955 to over 50% today. As a result, then, by the late 20th century, it was clear that conventional dikes and drains just were not going to cut it anymore, and so engineers opted to think really big instead. And thus, G-Cans was born, an entirely underground, entirely auxiliary river of sorts into which all of that runoff could be sent when things got a bit too wet. Work began in 1992, and after 230 billion yen, which is about $1.6 billion, the underground discharge channel officially opened in 2006. And say what you like about that being a fair whack of cash, but they certainly seem to have gotten their money's worth, as in addition to the main giant cave already discussed, they also constructed 5 monumental vertical shafts up to 74.5 meters deep, which is deep enough for the Statue of Liberty to fit inside with some room to spare. These shafts serve as giant storm drains. When heavy rains hit, excess water from overflowing rivers pours into the shafts instead of inundating the city streets. The water then rushes through around 6.5 kilometers of tunnels, each being about 10 meters across, and then converges into the main tank. From there, an army of pumps, each powered by rather meaty turbine engines, can blast 200 cubic meters of water per second out of the tank and harmlessly into the Edogawa River, which carries the deluge out to Tokyo Bay. The overall capacity of this underground colossus is mind-bending. The entire system can hold up to 670,000 cubic meters of floodwater at a time, roughly equal to 268 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water. Mercifully, it hasn't ever needed to hold quite that much, and let's hope it never does. Instead, it's better to have too much safety measure than over-engineered solution that could handle a truly biblical downfall just in case such a thing should ever come. On average, it gets used about 7 times a year, which, when you stop to think about it, is quite a lot. That's an average of 7 life and economy ruining floods a year swept aside and pushed out to sea. We can actually put numbers to the economic drainage averted too, as in the first 18 years of the GCAN's operation, it has prevented an estimated 148 billion yen, or $1 billion US-ish, in flood damage, i.e. not far off paying for itself outright, with many, many years of operation still left. Apparently, too, when you stand in the main vault during a tour, don't worry, they only offer them in the dry season, it feels otherworldly, and it's easy to forget this space isn't a sci-fi film set or a supervillain's lair. It's a very practical piece of infrastructure, one that most locals remain unaware of as they go about their day, free from wading and return to their home to find it not drifting out into the Pacific Ocean. A question, though, because actually, it turns out that the GCANS only protects a portion of Greater Tokyo, something that's hardly surprising if you've ever been there and come to appreciate just how stupidly big the place actually is. So, what do you do when one mega drain isn't enough? Obviously, you build more of them, don't you? Tokyo's hidden flood rivers, the subterranean reservoirs. So, if the GCANS is Tokyo's superhero flood tunnel, its lesser-known and smaller siblings are more like the sidekicks, silent, unseen, but always on standby. These hidden rivers, as some have taken to calling them, might lack the spectacle of GCAN's colossal columns and capacity, but in day-to-day flood protection, they are every bit as vital. Take the Furukawa underground regulating ponds, which we have a feeling might have been a bit of a direct translation, as an example, as it was built between 2009 and 2017 and lies beneath Minato Ward, the one with Tokyo Tower in it, by the way, and comprises a 3.3 kilometer long, 7.5 meters in diameter tunnel, which is capable of storing up to 135,000 cubic meters of floodwater. That's the equivalent of 54 Olympic swimming pools. Built at a cost of 24.5 billion yen, roughly $170 million US, it functions as an emergency detour when rainfall overwhelms surface channels, with water being diverted down a 52-meter vertical shaft into the tunnel, which then fills up and is later pumped back up to be returned downstream once the storm has passed. Notice the subtle difference in operation there, too, as unlike the GCANS, which hurls floodwater along the Edogawa River, Furukawa's design is more self-contained. It collects the water, then returns it when it's safe to do so. Its construction was, unsurprisingly, given how much stuff is underneath Tokyo, an exercise in threading the needle. The tunnel route passes directly beneath skyscraper foundations, sewer lines, and the Namboku metro line. As a result, crews had to drill with surgical precision, A, to avoid unwittingly drilling into the side of a 3000 series electric multiple unit, and B, not to create vibrations severe enough that might disturb or even endanger the various other subterranean amenities around them. Remember how we said there was more than one of these systems? Well, sure enough, the Furukawa Pond was in fact the city's second such underground reservoir, with the first having opened in 1997 to cover the Kanda River, another flood-prone waterway in western Tokyo. That particular project involved a 4.5 kilometer long tunnel that was 13 meters wide, and since it opened, the Kanda has behaved itself. There's been no floods, no drama. And now there are even plans afoot to maybe extend the tunnel all the way to Tokyo Bay, effectively creating a second Kanda River beneath the original. And if you're wondering how many such systems there are in In total, the Tokyo metropolitan government lists 27 regulation ponds, a la Furukawa, as well as a further 8 diversion channels, a different type of engineered waterway that can come both open or enclosed that reroutes excess river flow via an alternative path during floods. This overall approach, however, the give water different places to go one, isn't all that Tokyo does to fend off the floods, with the city still building traditional levees, storm surge barriers, and elevated embankments. And while some criticize the cost, engineers say that Japan has no choice but to build underground. There simply isn't space to build enough appropriate systems above ground, and the alternative, do nothing, is obviously pretty unwise. That mindset, however, has given rise to some of the most ambitious subterranean engineering in the world. In other cities, flood prevention means digging ditches, praying to the god of your choosing, and stocking up on sandbags. But in Tokyo, it means building multi-million-dollar holes in the ground that hopefully will never need to be fully used. The Great Wall of Japan. So, if Japan's underground flood tunnels show how seriously the country takes storms, its tsunami defenses reveal what happens when that same seriousness goes into overdrive. You see, after the catastrophic 2011 Tohoku earthquake and subsequent tsunami, which killed at least 19,759 people and destroyed 45,700 buildings, Japan launched one of the most ambitious coastal defense campaigns in modern history. The goal? Ensure nothing like that, or even approaching it, ever happens again. The result? A nearly 400-kilometer-long chain of seawalls up to 14.7 meters high that now guards the country's northeastern coastline. Some, for obvious reasons, have taken to calling it the Great Wall of Japan. Construction took over a decade and cost roughly 820 billion yen, that's around $5.6 billion, and represented one of Japan's largest civil engineering undertakings ever, which is truly saying something given their rather illustrious history of this sort of thing. Japan was no stranger to seawalls before 2011 either. Towns like Taro, devastated by tsunamis in 1896 and 1933, had already built extensive barriers. Taro's 10-meter-high, double-layered seawall system was completed in the 1950s and had even earned an early version of the same Great Wall nickname that we just saw. Many engineers had assumed these walls could withstand all but the rarest tsunamis, with them being designed to handle waves of up to 8 meters. And for decades, that all held true, but then came the 11th of March, 2011. On that fateful day, a magnitude 9 earthquake triggered a tsunami with waves as high as 15 meters. Daro, the existing seawall, long thought nigh on impenetrable, was overtopped easily, naught but a speed bump in the face of such a ferocious onslaught of water. The town was devastated, with 181 people losing their lives there alone, despite the defenses. Elsewhere, and similarly, concrete barriers were overwhelmed or just destroyed entirely. Japan had planned for what they thought would be a worst-case event, but their estimations were way off, and their defenses were just not good enough. The national response, however, was equal parts swift and bold. If the old walls weren't tall enough, the new ones would be. Simple as, end of, no ifs, no buts. But Japan's engineers didn't just go higher, they also went smarter too, with the new seawalls incorporating deeper foundations, up to 25 meters at their most extreme, as well as interlocking concrete blocks, reinforced cores, and wave-dissipating revetments. Some, at the most vulnerable areas, even include geotextile membranes to hold everything together if overtopped. The guiding principle here is the wall may not stop the wave entirely, that had to be taken as a given after 2011, but it should remain standing, blunt the force, and buy time for those on the other side to make for the hills. However, this new Great Wall has sparked debate. Critics say it's changed the very nature of coastal communities. Where there was once open vistas, there are now concrete barriers. Some residents feel boxed in. Fishermen say the wall has severed towns from their historic ties to the sea. There's also concern about complacency. Will people trust the wall a bit too much and not bother to evacuate when they really should? Some scientists also worried that these barriers could even backfire. If breached, they might trap water inland like a dam. As of the time of writing, 2025, the project is at long last entering its final stretch. According to a government document released in August of last year, 2024, after over a decade of digging, pouring, relocating, and rebuilding, the government now says it's reached the overall completion phase for tsunami-hit regions. Most of the hard infrastructure, the seawalls, the housing, the 570 kilometers of new roads, has been ticked off the list. What's left is finishing touches, repurposing old relocation zones, fixing up the local seafood trade, and helping the last evacuees settle back in properly. The target for wrapping it all up? March of 2026. And before we wrap this chapter up, do consider this little extra bonus story for just a bit more context. In 1972, the mayor of a village called Fudai, Kotoku Wamura, pushed through a 15.5-meter floodgate across the local cove. It took 12 years to build and was widely mocked as overkill, with Kotoku himself being called a fool, paranoid, and all manner of other words that would get this video a bit demonetized. But then, when the 2011 tsunami hit, while Fudai's wall was overtopped, it didn't fail. It slowed the surge just enough to spare the town, and so while neighboring communities were destroyed, Fudai remained largely intact. One resident later said, "Without it, Fudai would have disappeared." And that ultimately is the wager with these structures. They may be expensive, intrusive, and even a bit brutalist, but they exist for one purpose only: to stand between entire communities and annihilation. In a country like Japan, where the sea gives and takes with equal ferocity, we'd be lying if we said we thought it was a wasted effort. Super levies, reinventing the humble riverbank. Sometimes flood defense isn't about building taller or digging deeper, it's about going wider. Much wider. Enter Japan's super levies, perhaps the least visually dramatic but most quietly revolutionary of all its anti-flooding megaprojects. The idea behind them is a simple one. Take a traditional levee, typically 20 to 30 meters wide at its base, and as the name rather gives away, supersize it, resulting in a levee that can be up to 300 to 500 meters wide. The concept was born in the late 1980s when planners in Tokyo started worrying about so-called zero-meter zones, low-lying areas at or below sea level that line the Arakawa and Sumida rivers. These areas house millions of people and contain critical infrastructure, and as a result, a single levee breach could flood subway tunnels, office towers, and entire wards in a matter of hours. After a few close calls, Tokyo decided to rethink the riverbank from the ground up. The result? A levee so wide and gently sloped that even if it gets overtopped, it doesn't collapse. It just becomes a shallow inland lake, slowly draining without catastrophic failure. The benefits of this approach are massive. First, it's virtually unbreachable. Even sustained overtopping doesn't eat away at the inner slope like it would on a conventional steep-sided levee. Second, the vast width gives it built-in earthquake resistance, hugely important in a city that sits on multiple fault lines. And third, unlike most flood barriers, super levees actually create usable land. Instead of a narrow strip of embankments with a maintenance road, you now have space for parks, housing, shops, even entire districts. To make this work in dense cities, Japan linked levee building with urban redevelopment. When old industrial sites or housing blocks along the river come up for renewal, the government steps in, the site gets cleaned, a massive platform of compacted engineering earth is built, and then the city builds back, only higher and safer than before. It's a rare case where flood control and city beautification actually go hand in hand, but here we are. The process isn't a fast one, however. One pilot project in Tokyo's Adachi ward built a 1.3-kilometer-long super levee that's now home to a park and residential buildings, all perched above the floodplain. Another in eastern Tokyo blends flood protection with modern high-rise living, and most residents have no idea their buildings sit atop what is essentially a green-clad megadike. Osaka has also adopted the approach along the Yodo River, but these projects are time-consuming and expensive, especially in areas that are already developed. As of a few years ago, only 2.3 kilometers of super levees had been completed in Tokyo, with another 6 kilometers underway. At this rate, covering all vulnerable zones, if it's possible at all, will take decades, perhaps even centuries. Still, planners remain committed. Japan's engineers view super levees as a long-term solution, one that future generations will benefit from, even if it takes a lifetime to build. And considering the increasing risk of climate-fueled megastorms, it's hard to fault their logic. The engineering effort itself is massive too. Each section involves shifting millions of cubic meters of earth. The base must be carefully layered with clay cores and drainage layers to prevent subsidence or erosion. In cross-section, a finished super levee resembles a pyramid, the width of a small town. Kind of. Super levees, we'd be the first to admit, are less dramatic than walls or tunnels, but their ambition is no less gargantuan. They reflect Japan's disaster management mindset. If you can't move people out of harm's way or build a whopping great wall, reshape the lands beneath so they can stay safe where they are. It's slow, costly, and politically tricky, but it absolutely works. Kamaishi's titanic breakwater. For Japan, however, not every tale of anti-flood mega-engineering is a success. For all Japan's prowess, there are some projects that ended in abject disaster and failed when it mattered most. And nowhere is that more stark than in the case of Kamaishi breakwater, a structure that was massive, ambitious, and ultimately powerless in the face of the very thing it was built to resist. Located in Kamaishi Bay, Iwate Prefecture, this wasn't just any seawall. This was the deepest tsunami breakwater, a breakwater being an offshore structure built to absorb or deflect incoming waves and protect the shoreline behind it, ever built, and at the time, it was a world record-holding symbol of Japanese ingenuity. Construction started in 1978 and didn't finish until 2009. That's nearly 30 years of meticulous effort and ocean-dwelling concrete work. By completion, the breakwater stretched 1.9 kilometers across the bay, plunged 63 meters down, and had cost nearly 220 billion yen, or around $1.5 billion. Outwardly, it was a marvel. Rows of giant concrete caissons, carefully locked into one of Japan's deepest coastal trenches. For Kamaishi, a town regularly smacked by tsunamis, it wasn't just a barrier, it was a promise that next time would be different, that next time they'd be ready. And why wouldn't they think that? It had been explicitly designed to blunt the kind of tsunamis Kamaishi had already seen, which were typically 8 to 10 meters high. The model said it would work, and that it would cut wave height by 40%, maybe more, that it would delay the surge, it would buy people time to get out. There was even early talk of it reviving the local economy. Investment would follow the safety, they said. But in the end, none of that mattered on the 11th of March 2011 when, as we already know, the Tohoku earthquake hit. At Kamaishi, the tsunami on that day wasn't 8 meters, it wasn't 10. It was 20 meters high as it swept in. The breakwater did its job, briefly, with some reports suggesting it delayed the first wave by a precious few minutes, which was long enough for some to flee. But then the ocean didn't stop. It rolled over the top of the wall, then slammed into its rear like a hammer. What came next was devastating. The breakwater could take no more, and it simply shattered. Vast concrete blocks, each the size of a truck, were ripped from the seabed and hurled ashore like rubble. The water, now unimpeded, surged into the city. Homes vanished, businesses disappeared, and 1,064 lives were lost. For all its scale and sophistication, the world's deepest tsunami barrier had lasted mere minutes. And in doing so, it upended more than just buildings. It shattered confidence. Because if a structure this huge, this expensive, this over-engineered couldn't hold the line, then what could? Some researchers later suggested it may have even made things worse. As it broke, they say, it may have channeled water in unexpected directions, creating chaotic currents, flinging debris and amplifying destruction in some areas. A fortress had become a battering ram. Yet to call it a complete failure is probably a bit unfair. Some officials maintain the delay, however slight, did save lives. One port worker later even said that his family survived only because the wall gave them 6 extra minutes to run, and the so-called Kamaishi miracle saw hundreds of schoolchildren successfully evacuate, many of them leading adults to safety. In the face of a wave that tall and that fast, 6 minutes is a lifetime, it would seem. Not long enough to save a city, not long enough to save all its people, but long enough to save some of them. In the aftermath, the debate began. Should it be rebuilt? Could it be improved? In the end, the answer was no, not really. The breakwater was partially restored to a more modest spec, but no one rushed to repeat the original. Instead, attention shifted toward better evacuation systems, warning networks, and soft defenses like coastal forests. Ironically, on that latter point, Kamaishi's century-old pine tree buffer, a natural seawall from a simpler age, held up better than the concrete monster of modernity beside it. Still, the breakwater didn't vanish from memory, far from it. It became legend, a cautionary tale in Japanese civil engineering, the ultimate too big to fail project that failed anyway. What the Kamaishi story reminds us, however, more than anything, is that no matter how good the modeling, nature doesn't always stick to the script. Engineering can be brilliant, it can be beautiful, but it cannot make the world safe. Not completely, not forever. So yes, the breakwater was a marvel, and yes, it was a monument to human resolve, but it was also a warning that not every battle with nature can be won with height, depth, or rebar. Some storms you can't outbuild, you can only just try and survive them. Conclusion. So in the end, what does everything we've seen today add up to? Well, It adds up to tunnels that could swallow skyscrapers, to seawalls that split the horizon, and to levees wide enough to build entire neighborhoods on. Japan's flood defenses are the product of a country shaped, sometimes quite literally, by disaster, a nation that doesn't just brace for catastrophe, but tries to outthink it, outdig it, and when necessary, outbuild it. Some of these defenses are triumphs, others are cautionary tales, but whether they're underground caverns the size of stadiums, breakwaters taller than most apartment blocks, or grassy super levees that double as city parks, they all speak to the same truth. Japan takes the threat of water seriously and meets it with engineering that's bold, brash, and occasionally bizarre. Over-engineered? Possibly. Over-prepared? Definitely, but with so much at stake, that was gravely proven back in 2011. Pardon us for thinking that Japan just might have the right idea here, because as the waters rise and the risks keep mounting, the choice isn't really about ambition anymore, it's about survival. And if that means concrete by the kilometer and tunnels you pray you never have to use, well, better than wondering too late if you should have built bigger. Thank you for watching.